The outage arrived so quietly that Maya Ortiz at first mistook it for a software freeze. 1 second her 3 monitors glowed with repositories and ticket queues. The next, everything went black. Humming fans spun down. The apartment hushed as though someone had clapped a giant pillow over the whole block. In the usual rhythm of her life, code, compile, deploy, repeat, Maya rarely looked up from the blue-white light that made every day feel alike. But the sudden dark folded that routine like a circuit breaker flipped in her chest. She pushed her rolling chair back. From the 8th floor, the cityscape normally pulsed like a motherboard at night. Every window a diode. Now the skyline was a charcoal cutout, jagged and uncanny, with only the faint amber of battery-powered exit signs staining alleys. Farther down the avenue, car horns hiccuped, unsure what protocol to follow without traffic lights. A siren wailed, vulnerable instead of authoritative. Even the omnipresent glow of the billboards, those 15-story loops of sneaker ads and streaming trailers, had vanished. A total blackout, she realized. No fallbacks, no redundant grids. Maya's first instinct was professional. File a status report, open an incident channel, ping operations. But her phone found no cell towers. Wi-Fi lay comatose. Disconnected, she was a scuba diver who'd lost the air hose, tasting panic until she remembered the simplest fix: breathe on her own. She lit the fat emergency candle she kept for scent, not utility, and set it on her kitchen counter. Vanilla and slow beeswax filled the room, and she actually heard its wick cringe as it burned. The apartment, spare and angular, felt too empty for this kind of quiet. Maya, 29, single by inertia rather than philosophy, had moved to the building 3 years earlier because fiber internet was included in rent. She often joked that her neighbors were unknown endpoints, visible only as MAC addresses on the building's Wi-Fi list. She could identify the retired couple in 7B. Valdez Alexa frequently saturated the 2.4 gigahertz band, and a family upstairs whose twin boys kept naming their phone hotspots Dinosaur 1 and Dinosaur 2. But she'd never met any of them. Her closest in-person friendship consisted of quick exchanges with the Lebanese deli owner across the street. Hot sauce? Yes, please. She assumed the rest of the world was as voluntarily siloed as she was, and the assumption grew comfortable, like sleep. Now ions of boredom and anxiety bounced in her chest. She paced restless, a creature bred for fluorescent cube farms suddenly dumped into a primeval night. The candle's circle of light felt small. She dug out her camping headlamp, but the beam inside the apartment only made the surrounding darkness feel heavier. What did people do in outages? Board games? She owned none. Read a paperback? She'd switched to e-books years ago. The single physical novel on her shelf was a college copy of Frankenstein, whose binding had surrendered to dust. Her eye snagged on the balcony door. Beyond it rose the narrow fire escape staircase to the roof, a lattice of wrought iron she'd never climbed. The building management discouraged tenants from going up. Liability, they said. But the lock was a mere hook in an eyelet. On impulse, she cranked open the glass panel, inhaled air rich with petrichor. Clouds that had threatened thunderstorms all day were clearing, revealing an indigo sky stippled with stars that Manhattan light pollution usually erased. A mischievous idea frothed in the silence. She could project something onto the sky or the neighboring blank wall, occupy the night with images the way code filled her screens. The thought arrived half-remembered from childhood. Shadow puppets cast by campfires on tent fabric. Her father holding up hands that became wolves or doves. Shadow play required light, shapes, and a surface. She had at least 2 of those. She rummaged. In a junk drawer lived a folding utility lantern that charged by crank. promotional swag from a conference, and a thin white bedsheet reserved for guests that never arrived. She found cardboard from a recent laptop shipment, scissors, and a roll of gaffer tape. The candle kept her from total blindness as she set to work at the kitchen island, sketching silhouettes with a half-dried Sharpie, a dragon, a commuter train, a giant heart with gears, a shy girl at a laptop. The shapes emerged in the flicker like summoned familiars. She sliced them out, taped skewers to the backs for handles. By the time she finished, her hands were striped with black marker. Would anyone see? Possibly the night itself, which felt like an audience. She crammed the sheet, lantern, puppets, and a roll of twine into her backpack, grabbed a hoodie against the October chill, and climbed the fire escape. The roof greeted her with a damp tar smell and a vantage she'd never experienced. Block after block lay in hush, the usual neon arteries flatlined. Yet candles winked in some windows. Flashlights roved like cautious fish. A civilian constellation. Something about being above it all, sharing darkness equally with strangers, coaxed a grin from her she hadn't felt since shipping her first major feature. She tied one edge of the sheet to a plumbing vent pipe, the other to an ancient TV antenna. Wind flapped it like a surrender flag. She cranked the lantern 15-20 times until its LED bar glowed bright, then set it inside an open shoebox so light spilled forward in a directed beam. She positioned herself behind the lantern, slid the dragon puppet between. The sheet blossomed with wings of ragged fire. Across the street, in a building whose roofline matched hers, a shape appeared. Human, small, staring. Maybe a smoker taking a break. Maya inhaled, heart jittering, and made the dragon bow, then flap across the sheet. She switched to the train, puffing along an imaginary track. Then the laptop girl who looked from screen to sky, puzzled. Finally, the giant gear heart thunk-thunked, swelling. She gave it comedic spasms, and the gear popped out. Clank. The distant silhouette raised both arms, applause silent but unmistakable. Maya laughed aloud, a startled sound that whipped away in the wind. A minute later, metal scraped on the fire escape below. Footsteps. She froze, fearing a reprimand. Instead, a voice floated up, tentative and amused. "Hello? Whoever's running the Rooftop cinema? Tickets still available?" Maya peered over the parapet. A teenage boy stood on the ladder, flashlight between teeth, juggling a small battery speaker in one hand and a bag of popcorn in the other. His t-shirt read, "I paused my game for this." She almost answered with reflexive sarcasm, but saw the earnest thrill in his eyes. "Admission is a snack tax," she called. He grinned, climbed over, and handed her the bag. It was microwave popcorn, half cold, perfect. "I'm Toby," he said, arranging himself on a skylight hatch. "Power's out at my house. Shocker. Your show is cooler than my mom reading by candlelight." Maya nodded, suddenly shy. "I'm Maya, improvising." The next scene she improvised featured the dragon befriending the train, hitching a ride, the heart acting as conductor. Toby pumped background music from his phone's last battery bar, an 8-bit fantasy loop, and harmony bloomed under the shadows. 2 windows down, a door banged. Mrs. Valdez, gray hair in a sleep cap, appeared on the adjoining roof holding a thermos and an old-fashioned hurricane lamp. "I heard voices," she said, squinting, "and flapping." "Shadow theater," Toby told her. "Come watch." She traversed the narrow gap via a maintenance plank as sure-footed as someone accustomed to balcony gardening. She poured hot chocolate into the thermos lid for them to share. Steaming cinnamon scented the air. The audience had tripled. Maya felt a zing of responsibility. Give them story, not just spectacle. She stitched a narrative on the fly. Dragon steals city's power. People forgotten. only collective heartbeat can relight the world. She shaped the puppets accordingly. Dragon snatching a skyscraper's glowing top, laptop girl dropping her screen to chase with lantern, train ferrying townsfolk who each carried small flames. Midway through the telling, she noticed additional silhouettes at the parapets. A tall man in business slacks clutching a violin case, a mother with two toddlers wrapped in blankies, and an elderly man clutching a camp chair. Street-level murmurs drifted upward. Someone in the building across the avenue yelled, "Turn it this way!" Maya angled the lantern so the sheet's far side glowed, a projection for both roofs. When she lifted the puppets, their black outlines towered 3 stories high on the adjacent brick. The crowd below, maybe a dozen people, gasped and applauded. Carried by adrenaline, she treated bricks as pixels, moving characters so they marched across the massive canvas. Toby, ever the stagehand, cued music from his speaker. Dramatic orchestral he must have saved offline. During a quiet passage, the businessman in slacks surprised everyone by unclicking his violin case. He tuned in rapid sweeps, then poured out a lilting melody that curled around the puppets' silent mouths like a voice. Even Maya, orchestrator of this ragtag ensemble, felt goosebumps rise on her arms. As Dragon and townsfolk battled, her cardio silhouette choreography pretty much freestyle. The toddlers squealed, arms in air, chanting, "Rah!" The old man in the camp chair rapped his cane like a drum. More roofs sprouted watchers, silhouettes perched on HVAC units, couples wrapped in quilts, someone holding up a transistor radio to capture audio. Maya ended the saga with Dragon seeding stolen light, everyone lifting lanterns at once. For a finale, she produced the gear heart, but altered the pacing so each of its teeth represented a different apartment. She let the heart beat slowly, each thud timed to the violin's bowed pulse, and as it filled the wall canvas, she imagined the entire neighborhood as one organism. She lowered the puppets. Wind carried silence thicker than applause. Darkness pressed, expectant. Then claps, cheers. Whistles exploded from balconies and fire escapes. Somewhere, a pot banged like a gong. The toddlers shouted, "Again! Again!" Maya stepped into the lantern's glow, no longer a faceless puppeteer. She waved. "Props powered by cardboard and insomnia," she said. Laughter trickled back. Power stayed out. Phones leaned toward red zones. Yet no one left the improvised amphitheater. Mrs. Valdez refilled cups from a second thermos. Toby demonstrated flashlight semaphore he'd learned from a YouTube channel. Before the collapse of civilization, he joked. And the violinist, whose name turned out to be Cedric from 6C, played a reel that coaxed the mother and her toddlers into spinning across the roof like diminutive planets. Conversation bubbled. Where were you during the blackout? What do you actually do for work? How long have you lived here? Questions Maya had never posed, despite sharing elevators for years. She learned Mrs. Valdez used to teach art history and still sketched the skyline daily. Toby's mother, Aisha, was an ER nurse working the night shift and might be stuck in traffic mayhem somewhere. Cedric freelanced with the pit orchestra for Broadway shows, currently dark due to budget cuts. The elderly cane drummer, Mr. Crane, had once worked as a projectionist in Midtown cinemas before everything went digital. He told Maya she'd reincarnated a lost craft. They traded snacks, Maya's emergency almonds, Cedric's contraband chocolate meant for a date that had ghosted him, Mr. Crane's peppermints older than Toby. Someone dragged up a battery-powered lantern shaped like a pumpkin, left over from Halloween decor, and set it on the roof's center. Light pooled, communal and impartial, painting faces gold. The talk meandered toward memories of other outages. The 2003 Northeast blackout, the post-Sandy days, the ludicrous fragility of their wired lives. Maya admitted she unreels in panic when her internet hiccups. Toby said he once spent an entire weekend offline at scout camp and had the best sleep of his life. Cedric mused that music halls used to be blackout zones by design. Audiences concentrated on sound alone. "You realize," Mrs. Valdez said, tilting her lamp, "chairs exist inside my apartment, and a perfectly good gas stove for tea. We could go in, keep this going." The group hesitated, reluctant to relinquish the rooftop's infinite ceiling. Maya felt the same tug. This raw connection might shrink under fluorescence and drywall. But a breeze cut through her hoodie. Autumn's bite. "Maybe we do intermission downstairs," she suggested, "and come back for Act Two?" A plan formed. Raid pantries for shelf-stable treats, carry candles and lanterns to Mrs. Valdez's place, reconvene at midnight on the roof for another show. Volunteers dispersed along stairwells, promising return. Maya folded the sheet, collected puppets. Toby insisted on crafting new characters during the break. He wanted a superhero whose power was manual override. Inside 8A, Maya unearthed a dusty shoebox of colored pencils and blank printer paper. She hadn't drawn recreationally since college doodles on lecture handouts. Toby plopped at her table, sketching a caped silhouette with a lightning bolt shaped like an old-fashioned fuse. "Hero for the blackout age," he proclaimed. She added a sidekick, a child wielding a flashlight like a sword. Together they cut out shapes, layering cardboard for sturdiness. When they finished, the apartment felt smaller again, but no longer lonely. The candle's flame looked companionable. They carried supplies to 7B. Mrs. Valdez's unit surprised Maya. Every patch of wall displayed framed charcoal drawings. Rooftops, pigeon wings mid-beat. Graffiti taggers in silhouette against dawn. "Your show needs a set designer," the older woman said, guiding them to her balcony to hang sketches of city skylines that would become scenic backdrops. As neighbors gathered, the living room became a bohemian salon. Cedric jammed with Mr. Crane on a makeshift drum, an upside-down stockpot. Toby found a deck of playing cards and taught the toddlers a slapjack variant illuminated by a lantern sitting in a colander for diffusion. Maya exhaled astonishment. They were entertaining themselves without screens, and no one seemed deprived. When talk slowed, Mr. Crane shared a fable from his projectionist days. A short, silent film lost to decay, about a city that forgets its own heart until the streetlights go dark. Only then do people see stars and rediscover wonder. Maya felt a prickle. Her puppet plotline accidentally rhymed with that forgotten reel. Maybe some stories lurk in collective memory, waiting for circumstances to trigger them. At 11:45, they ascended the fire escape again, now seasoned climbers. More residents from adjacent buildings joined, guided by flashlight beams in the shape of arrows Toby had rehearsed from his semaphore stint. They brought offerings: a woman with a banjo, a college student hauling a chemistry lab clamp stand repurposed as lantern hook, an Indian software engineer lugging a pot of masala chai that perfumed the roof with cardamom. Maya erected the sheet once more, this time reinforced by binder clips from Mrs. Valdez's art kit. Cedric positioned himself at stage left, violin tucked. The banjo player, Priya, tuned. The pumpkin lantern served as footlight. Clouds parted, revealing enough moon to backlight the sheet faintly, so even when puppets rested, their cardboard edges ghosted across fabric. Act 2 began with Toby's superhero diving from a rooftop, cape rippling, flashlight sword aloft. Maya animated a whole skyline rising to greet him, thanks to newly drawn city backdrops. The hero confronted the dragon, but instead of combat, they exchanged pieces. Hero gifted flashlight. Dragon returned a spark of neon it had hidden under scales. The screenless audience cheered each nonviolent twist. Maya felt her earlier loneliness liquefy into something like purpose. The final tableau featured every puppet, train, dragon, heart, superhero, forming a chain. Behind them, Mrs. Valdez's drawing of a night sky full of constellations became visible when Toby shone his phone flashlight from behind, soft and diffused. For a heartbeat, the sheet looked cosmic. Then that light winked out as his battery died, leaving only moonlight filtering through. The audience hushed, moved by the imperfection. And then, as though cued by some cosmic stage manager, electricity surged. Streetlights blinked like drowsy eyes. Windows reignited in grids. Air conditioning units shuddered awake. A refrigerator compressor down below whined. The LED lantern brightened automatically, washing out the sheet. Maya heard a collective "ah," akin to curtain fall. After a stunned pause came laughter, rueful and relieved. The toddlers danced in the sudden brightness. Priya plucked her banjo strings. Cedric riffed, both amplified by the city's returning electric hum as if microphones had switched on. Yet no one rushed back to charging cables or TVs. They lingered on the roof, continuing songs, passing chai, retelling favorite puppet moments like sports highlights. The blackout had ended. The blackout mood persisted. Near 2 a.m., people began drifting to bedrooms. Cedric offered Maya a gentle salute with his bow. "We should start an inter-building troupe," he said. "Shadow and light co-op." "Only if auditions allow cardboard expertise," she replied. As she folded the sheet and stowed lantern, Maya realized her heartbeat matched a tempo outside algorithmic metrics. She descended to her apartment aware that she'd met more neighbors tonight than in 3 years, and no follow-up calendar invite was necessary. Connection already existed, offline and alive. Before bed, she glanced at her dark monitors. She didn't feel urgency to power them. Instead, she opened her window. Across the courtyard, small balconies flickered with candles not yet extinguished. On a fire escape, Toby sat with another kid she didn't know, showing how to make a dog's shadow with fingers arching. Mrs. Valdez sketched under a desk lamp. Cedric's violin reached her faintly through open stairwell windows, chords wandering but resolute. Screens would return tomorrow. Pings and tickets and sprints would reclaim cerebral real estate. But something irrevocable had occurred. A vulnerability shared like a password never to be revoked. Darkness had debugged their isolation, if only temporarily, proving that light is sweetest when we create it together instead of simply tapping a switch. Maya finally lay down, puppets arrayed on her nightstand like protectors. She felt, for the first time in months, not the dull ache of loneliness, but a buoyant anticipation, of rooftop encores, of tea salons, of hands turning into birds against sheets. Somewhere, down the hall perhaps, somebody hummed the melody Cedric had played. She let it carry her into sleep, grateful that the blackout had illuminated what 24/7 brightness never could. The shadow of one person's imagination can become a lantern for an entire neighborhood if given space to flicker.